Hello, this is a demo of Beepee Dynamic Line Chart's drawing functions. We're going to be looking at the different types of object that Dynamic Line Chart can draw. And I've got a composition set up here with the DLC plugin applied to a solid layer, and you can see all the different types of objects that the plugin can draw here. Now we need some data to show, and I have this Excel sheet with a chart which we're going to copy, and this has been saved to a CSV file. I'm not going to go into that here. What this shows is some sine functions, and there's a middle sine function, and then two similar curves offset by 0.5 on the y-axis this way, and then there are some linear approximations of the same curves at 90-degree intervals. And then these are also animated, which we'll see when we bring this CSV into DLC. So I'm going to go ahead and load that CSV in Dynamic Line Chart. That's all loaded. Now we should see in these data slots the same data as in our CSV. Now this is a little small given the size of our chart, so we can't really see the curve there. So I'm going to change the dimensions of the screen. Oops. And I'm going to do the same for the x-axis. So now let's now we've set the grid up. Let's have a look at the curve itself. Let's make it white, and let's make the line a bit thinner. Now, as we saw in the Excel sheet, this is an animated curve. So let's go and set the animation up. Put a keyframe in there. Let's zoom in. Now we can see that the curve is animated. Now something we might want to do is to zoom into just a part of the chart, maybe to show just one or two cycles of the curve. So to do that, we can go back into our grid parameters, and we could say we could go in even closer and just look at one cycle. But for this demo, we're going to have a look at two. And then what we're going to do is move the view of the chart along from the beginning to the end. And so as you can see now, what we have is an animated sine function and an animated scroll along the x-axis. Let's go back to the beginning. Hopefully we're done with these. So now let's rename this and bring in the other sine curves, the maximum and the minimum, and we'll show those. So we can save some time by just duplicating all of those parameters and then just choosing a different column, and let's make this one dashed. Let's duplicate that again, and then let's choose the max, and let's rename and the other one. Great, now suppose we just wanted to talk about one cycle and make a comment about it in our video or something. In order to do that, we've got an object which might be useful. So that's a big yellow block, but it's obscuring the view, so let's make that transparent. And let's give this a border. And let's also make it dashed. So now we have a box around the cycle showing the minimum and the maximum of one cycle on the horizontal and vertical axes. But that's not what we want for this demo, so we'll just hide that for the moment. Another thing we might want to do is show this sine curve in a different way. We might want to fill underneath the curve or above the curve or between the curve and the zero line or the origin. And the way we do that is by using a fill object. So I'll just duplicate our first sine mid function, and we're going to use a fill object. So let's make this a bit more transparent, and we'll rename that. You can, if you wish, draw from the top or from the bottom, but we're just going to draw to 0. And it's a very similar object to this, which is line column, and that, if we hide the fill, make it less transparent. What this does is draws lines from the origin to each point on the curve, but we don't need that for this demo. So that's a nice fill, but we might also want to fill between the top and the bottom, the minimum and the maximum curve here. So we need another type of object. Let's copy this one and make it fully visible. This type of object is a area fill, And what we're going to do is we're going to fill from the min to the max. And as you can see, those colours, let's say max to the min, I think. So that we get the right colours here and here. So that's quite a stark object. But as we have 3 curves here, maybe it would be nicer to do a fill from the mid to the top and a mid to the bottom, and we have for that a fill object. So let's say max, mid and min. That's still quite stark, so let's take that all down a bit and adjust these a little bit too. So now we have a number of objects in the scene, from just plain curves to a simple fill object, and then a gradient fill between 3 of those curve objects. But there's more to add. In our chart in Excel, we had these nice straight lines, which we might want to make use of. So let's create another curve, and let's use X line. So now we have this straight line. We might want to show these points here on the curve to show how they're changing. So for that we have, I'll just rename that. So for that we have a marker object. Let's rename it. So now we have some points on our straight line curve object, showing how each of those points changes over time. But you might not want a circle shape, so we have some other shapes here. We have a star, a triangle, or a square, and so on. But we're going to stick with the circle. But you might also not want any of those shapes, so in which case we have another type of object, and we'll hide the marker for the moment, and that is a sprite object. So let's rename this. Now the way sprite objects work is we need to bring in a source layer, and we have this nice smiley to use as an icon rather than a simple geometric shape. So let's hide that, and we just select the smiley here, and let's make it a bit bigger. Any layer can be used as a sprite source, as it doesn't have to be an image, it could be a video source, and so it would be animated or any other composition. Let's just have a look. But sometimes you might want to use a sprite's animation in a different way. For example, maybe you wanted to base the frame of the sprite on the height of each of the points on the chart. So for that we have a V sprite. And I've set up another composition over here. It's just some webdings or wingdings or some other font-based emoticons in this in a sequence from quite sad to neutral to very happy. So we're going to go back to our composition and let's drag that to our timeline and hide it. And now in VSprite we can choose our emoticon composition. But as you can see, they're all a bit unhappy at the moment. So it's frame 0 to frame 6, because there are 7 frames. And our value value is from, our values are from -1 to 1. So now as you can see, -1, the emoticon is unhappy, and at 0 it's kind of neutral, and then up here it's very happy. Let's have a look. So as you can see, they're sad, and then they're neutralish, and then they're happy. So dynamic line chart here is taking its instructions from the vertical part of the points value for each of these points. So that's all great, but it's not necessarily what we want to see in our demo. So let's bring the markers back. So now we've got these maximum and minimum curves here, and we've also got their linear equivalents here. If this was real data, the difference between the maximum and the minimum might be an error range, a plus or minus error. So to show that sort of thing, we have an error object. So just rename it, and we'll say change the color. So there you can see these little error lines on our linear curve object. Now that's great. Now we might want to add on top of that some data labels to show what those minimum and maximum numbers actually are. And we can do that with a label object. So these text labels are a little bit big, so let's make them a little smaller. Let's get rid of some of the wasted space. Let's get rid of the border. Bring those up a bit. And let's make the background a bit darker. And a bit more transparent so we can see behind them. Great. So let's have a look at that. That's all working, and as you can see, the values are changing through the animation. Now let's duplicate that, and we'll make them, put them at the bottom. So now you can see labels at the top and the bottom of the error bars. So we might now want to add some more information to the chart. Maybe a line to show this maximum value here. So let's create a guide object. And that's going to be at 1.5, and it's going to be on the horizontal axis. So let's change the color to yellow. Let's make it dashed. Let's make it say maximum. And let's give it a bit of a border, but with the same color. That's a bit big. Now let's put that and let's move it over to the left a bit. So there we go. There we have a nice little guide giving us some information about the other objects on the screen. But we can add some other features too. So let's create another object. Rather than using a single value, we might want to refer to a single point on the screen. Let's rename that. And let's point to 900 and 1. So there we go, you can see the object there. Let's change that. Let's change this to red. And let's give this a label. Let's turn the dashes off. Let's make that red as well. So now we have a little arrow pointing to a value on the screen. It's showing some text here, but we could have had a different value if we want. We could show, say, the X value or the Y value or the coordinate, but we've chosen to have some text. So let's make a copy. And let's rename. And let's bring this to -1. And let's rename it end. And let's move it to the left. So now this shows some helpful points on the chart that you may want to use to show people what you want them to be interested in. And you can see the point on the curve moving between the two points there. Now, what if you wanted to show the distance between the 2 points? For that, we have a measure object. So let's create a measure object and rename it. Now let's change these coordinates. Oops. So now we can see this measure here. So let's move this bar to the left. So there you have it, a demo of most of the drawing functions in Dynamic Line Chart. There's quite a few things going on in there. It's a busy little chart, probably with more objects than most charts will ever need. But we've been able to build them much more quickly than we would have if we had tried to put the charts together from scratch. Thanks for watching.